My name is Bond, Susan Bond. I'm a professor of religious studies here at George Mason University. Today I have a story to tell you about a year I spent in India studying yoga. As a young woman, I had, and still as a matter of fact have, an adventurous streak. And I was in school in Denmark, and I was inspired by all the things I read about the spiritual life of India. So a speaker came through and from India to our school, and I asked him about a good school to go to in India, and he gave me the name of Kaivalyadam Institute in Lonavala, India. I applied and I was accepted, and I made plans to go from Denmark to India. I traveled with a friend, and we actually went overland. We started out in Denmark, of course, and then went to Istanbul, went to Ankara, went to Tehran, went to Herat, Kabul, Peshawar, Lahore, down through northern India to New Delhi, and then finally to Lonavala, which is on the western side of India near Bombay, Mumbai, about 2 to 4 hours from Mumbai. Lonavala is a beautiful little town. It was a hill station in British colonial times, which means that during the monsoon rains or the heat of the summer, people went up to Lonavala to have a little respite from the heat. And there is this lovely Institute of Yoga. It's still there. And it had, at that time, 10 students and 6 teachers. And there were only 2 Westerners, myself among them, at the school. The rest were Indian students. And it was quite a well-regarded school. They were going to go on to become, have good positions as teachers in India. The language, it was taught both in Hindi and in English, and I learned a bit of Sanskrit while I was there as well. And it was quite an experience. It's one that's marked my life in many ways. But let me just give you an idea of the shape of the day at the school. We rose in the early morning, had a simple shower, went up, a simple meal, went up to the Swami's hut to hear the puja prayers, and this is when I learned Sanskrit, and I learned to read and recite the prayers. Then we went down to the asana hall, and we practiced yoga for 2 hours a day, had a lunch, and then had lectures in which we learned about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the physiology, psychology, and philosophy of yoga. And it was, a strict but not rigid school, but it had very difficult exams. I took some of the most difficult exams I've ever taken in my life. Our midterms and finals, we had to study all week and sit down and write for hours and hours at a time, all the information that we had learned for the course that term. I want you to know you won't have to do that for my course this term. But the most interesting thing that we learned, and the thing that I really enjoy telling people about, is we learned to do the kriyas, and these are cleansing techniques, and we learned them right away. Almost as soon as I got to the school, we began to learn how to do these kriyas or cleansing techniques. So I'm going to not demonstrate, but at least show you a little bit about these cleansing techniques today. The first one is we learned to use a neti pot, and this is maybe familiar to you. It's plastic. I got this at CVS. When I went to India, you couldn't get neti pots at CVS. Nobody had ever heard of them, but now they're fairly well known and used to treat people, I think, with sinus infections or asthma, or just as a good cleansing technique. The idea is you put warm salt water in it and put it to your nose and, very gently, carefully pour the water through your nose and it will come out. Of course, your nose, your sinus passages are open, and you can pour the water through and it will come out from one nostril, it will come out the other. And then you pour it through on the other side, goes through one nostril, out the other. The only thing you might do is drown yourself if you hold it at the wrong angle, but usually you won't do that for very long. And eventually you get used to it and you know how to hold the neti pot just right and the water comes through. And this is very good for the sinuses because flus and that sort of thing incubate in the sinuses. It clears the sinuses out, just gives you a more open, clean feeling in the head. So that's not so difficult. The next one begins to get more difficult. And I apologize, this is almost as old as I am, this little catheter that we used for a nasal catheter, so it's not the full length. But the idea of this is to put the catheter up your nose, and that sinus passage is opened through your mouth, and gently, 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 you put it up through your nose, gently, 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 especially at first. You bring it out your mouth so you can floss with the catheter. And just as the water pouring through opened up the sinus passages, the catheter going through, cleaning out the sinuses, really opens them up. It desensitizes the sinus and is good for preventing colds and flus. The interesting thing about this school was it had a small hospital attached to it. It was a school, an ashram, and a hospital. And they used the techniques that I'm showing you to help asthma patients. So without any kind of medicine, you use these techniques from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, 2,500 years old, to treat asthma. And they did it. It was very effective. Now, you thought that was maybe a little bit tricky. It gets even trickier. Here is a catheter, and this we used as a stomach pump, essentially. So you drink a quart of warm salt water, and then you put this catheter, you start to swallow it, which is hard to do because once it gets to this part of your throat doesn't like the feeling of something that doesn't swallow and go down. Your food goes down, but a catheter doesn't. You feel the pressure back there, and your gag reflex starts to go into gear, and get this out of me, I don't like it. But if you continue a swallowing motion like this, just like with food, you can gently push it down, and once you're past this part of your throat, it's no problem to push it on down. And once you do, all that water, by the vacuum effect, comes back up out, and you've given yourself a kind of homemade stomach pump. The benefit of it is that, again, you're cleansing yourself. It makes you feel very light. It has a nice feeling about it. When you first start to do it, it's not very pleasant, and the principal of the school was standing next to me when I first started doing it, and he kept saying, swallow, swallow, swallow. And so I kept swallowing, and it went down, and I found that in one regard it was quite easy. So you do this you do this every day, and maybe these catheter ones about once a week. And pretty soon your autonomic nervous system kind of calms down. It realizes you're not going to die. You don't have food stuck in your throat, and gag reflex wants to get it out of you. And you get the autonomic nervous system calmed down. This is one of the purposes of yoga, is to calm the body down and also to cleanse, do interior cleansing, the parts of ourselves that aren't usually available for cleansing. But the yogis figured it out. Finally, this is the most dramatic one, and we didn't do this for at least the first 6 months of our year of studying yoga, but you've been doing these other techniques for 6 months. You're sort of used to all these interventions and used to these cleansing techniques, and now we do this final one with a cloth. There are actually some others that get even more fantastic, but this is as far as I went. So here we have a cloth, and let me unravel it so you get an idea of how long that cloth is. Here we go. There's still more. Here we go. Still more. Like this, like that, and that. And it's a muslin cloth, so it's about that wide, and just a nice fine muslin. You clean it, of course, and then you put it in salt water that's been boiled, so you're cleaning it again, and it's wet, and then you swallow it slowly, and it takes about 20 minutes. And so kind of a slow process. This is a little bit tricky because as you're swallowing it, sometimes when you breathe in, you can feel it expand and kind of cut off your breath. And if you panic, you could be in trouble because you can't pull it out because one of the sphincters here at the stomach will grab hold of it. So you might be in trouble if you panic, you try to yank it out, it grabs hold of it, boom, you're dead. No, you're not really. Because you always take scissors. First of all, you do it with someone else. So if you panic, someone's there to kind of calm you down. And then you take scissors with you, and at whatever stage you're at in swallowing, you can always cut it and swallow, the last inch or two, and it comes out someplace else. But you haven't panicked. So you swallow it, you leave about 2 or 3 inches at the end, and then slowly pull it back out, and naturally it's not very nice looking. It has all the mucus and bile from the stomach. But what it does is give the esophagus a kind of massage on the inside, because the esophagus thinks it's food, and so it's contracting as the cloth goes down, gives that the lining of the esophagus some sort of a massage, and then you're clearing all the mucus and bile out. And as I said, it turns out to have been quite effective in treating asthma for asthma patients. For 2 reasons. One, in the actual cleansing, and also because you're getting some kind of control over the autonomic nervous system. So asthma, has this effect of your breath. You feel like you can't get your breath, you panic, blah, blah, blah. But here, with this slow practice, you get some control over the autonomic nervous system, and that's supposed to be the benefit of doing it. Afterwards, it's quite extraordinary how light you feel. And the whole chest in this area feels very light, very clean, and then you go directly over to the asana hall and you practice asanas, and after that you don't need any coffee or much of anything else. It's really a wonderful technique. There's a lot more to say about that period of time I spent in India, but that's probably the most interesting and most dramatic. Thank you very much.